Okay, so you've written a short sketch in Pico-8 and you're stuck. You don't know how to make it sound better and you don't know how to make it longer. So I'm going to take you through a rough checklist of things you can play with to develop your tunes, make them longer and sounding more interesting. So here's a short loop written by one of my patrons, Finn. That's it. So when you're writing, there are many paths you can take for developing the music, and the path you do take will keep on forking and forking. So for the sake of this tutorial, I'm going to try and always start at the beginning and not try to go too deep into developing something. I'm also not going to worry about its context, like if it's in a game, and this way we can keep the topic focused on these composition tips. All right, tip number 1, control your parts, like the bass part or drum part, melody, accompaniment. If you control your parts, you have control over expanding your tune's depth. So for example, in this tune, I kind of see it as having 3 parts. We have the melody, which is on top here on A1. And then we have the accompaniment to that melody, which is in SFX 18. And then there's this kind of bass part happening here in the same SFX as 19, which is kind of like a low bass part. So what I'm going to do is, when I say control your parts and separate them out, this could mean assigning them to a completely different SFX. So it doesn't have to be this way, but just for the sake of visualizing what's going on here, I'm just going to put everything over into all the bass parts into SFX 20. So I'm just scrolling through using the arrow keys and command. For me, it's Mac. I'm command arrow keys to switch columns. I believe on PC it's control arrow keys to switch columns. So now this should sound exactly the same, but we've put the bass part over here. And then this part here, this is kind of going C, D, E, and it's leading back into F, which is kind of going into this note here. So I'm going to move this over into this part. And because it's kind of leading into F1, I'm going to assign it the same instrument. Yeah, so now that we've separated them out, now we can play with how the composition is going to unfold. So for example, maybe we just start with 19 and then we introduce 18 and then we put in 20 here. So let's turn off the loop points. So you can hear how the composition's kind of gradually unfolding. And this is an easy trick to use with pre-existing music, where you just take your parts, you separate them, and then you find some kind of pacing to unfold them over time. For this tune, we only have 3 parts, so unfolding them is fairly straightforward. But if you have more complicated texture, like a drum part, a more complicated bass part, some more accompaniment parts, then you can see how unfolding them in this way. We only got to pattern 02, but you could probably get to pattern 05 if you have more parts. Okay, so tip number 2 is to play with textures. So like echoes and volume tails, different instruments, different effects. So I'm just going to take this melody here and I'm just going to see what it sounds like if I create an echo in another pattern. So copy pasting, that's an echo, so I'm going to make them all quieter, and maybe I'll keep instrument 5, see what that sounds like. I'm not going to echo this low bass part. Okay. Get rid of that bass part. And let's just see what this sounds like. it's conflicting a little bit. So let's try a different instrument. Let's try a different effect. Okay, I'm not liking that either. So what happens if we kind of interesting. Let's try a different instrument. Okay, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to try moving it up the octave. So that's kind of a neat texture. So now why don't we try the same thing except with this column. I know for sure I'm going to have to turn down the volume, and let's try a different instrument. So I like that, except I don't like these step notes here, so I'm going to get rid of those. Yeah, so just little subtle things like that, all of a sudden we've created a little bit more depth in the melody and the harmony. What would happen if I tried a different effect? All right, I would say texturally, even just playing with this for a minute or two, this sounds a little bit more interesting. And this also gives you a little bit more material to play with when you're unfolding the parts, like in tip number 1. So we've got our melody in 19, we've got an accompaniment in 18, and then we've got kind of like an echo-ish effect for the melody and an echo-ish effect for the accompaniment. So now we've got 4 parts to unfold over time. So you'd be able to get a little bit more out of the composition. Okay, tip number 3, add parts. So similar to tip number 1, but not as a way to make the composition longer, but just to make what you have sound better. So this is maybe creating contrast in these melodic breaks here, adding a drum part, different frequencies, low frequencies, high frequencies, just to accompany the sketch that you've already got. So just for fun, let's just write in a drum part and see what that sounds like. So I'm going to use instrument 0, effect 1. Maybe too loud. So let's just put this over here like that. I'm going to move them all up 1. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to quickly create an instrument here using the noise instrument. So it's going to be really, really short, and then I'm going to add that to this part. Let's add a little bit more depth to the volume of these little ticks. Okay, what else can we do? Let's add some more notes in pattern 19 in these breaks. We'll try to create some contrast between the breaks, between the melody and the next phrase. So I don't know, let's try something like this. Maybe a different instrument. Let's try 7. Let's try a different note. Okay, so in here, let's try another something else. So let's try maybe something lower. That was interesting. So let's keep it all on F. So I'm just pasting some of these new bass notes in here. Yeah, right on. So working with different frequencies, things are a little bit higher in the frequency spectrum, like these little melodic things here. We might even be able to take them up higher. A drum part, which adds a kind of a rhythmic layer to it, and a little something that's a little bit lower in the bass part. We haven't really made the composition longer, but what we've done is added layers to make what we have sound a little bit better. Tip number 4, expanding the form. So after, let's say, about 2 times of hearing this loop, we definitely want some kind of contrast in the next pattern. And one way to do that is with a change in melody and harmony. So there's 2 ways I'm going to do this. One that requires music theory and one that doesn't. What they'll both have in common, though, is phrasing. So if we look at what we have a phrase that's mostly in F major, and it can kind of be divided into 2 parts. We've got this first half and we have this second half. So for the next phrase, we want a different pacing or a different structure to the phrase. So keeping that in mind, for patterns 20 and 21, the first way I'm going to do this is without theory. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to copy both of these into 20 and 21. And using the transposition keys, I'm just going to transpose it up all by 3 semitones. So I'm selecting all and I'm hitting Shift 3. And I'm going to do that the same with the other part. So contrasting from what happens before, but what I want is a different phrase structure. So what I might try to do is I'm going to take this here and transpose this all down by 2 semitones. And then I'm going to transpose this all again down by 2 semitones and this again down by 2 semitones. And then I'll do the same thing here. So taking all this is Shift J, and then highlighting this, Shift J, and then Shift J. Let's see what that sounds like. And we could probably take this and repeat it again. So just with some simple transposition and playing around with phrasing, you can create a different section of your composition that is a nice contrast to the previous section. So now the second way is with theory. So a good way to develop from here with the F major chord is on the 4 chord, B flat. And from there, you can pretty much go anywhere. So let me plug that in really quick. So I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to copy this into pattern 20 and copy this into pattern 19. into pattern 21. 21. There we go. And I'm going to try and keep the same texture as what we had. So I'm not going to play around with instruments. I'm going to take this melody and let's move it up to D. Okay, we want instrument 5, volume 2, effect 5. So I'm keeping the same melodic structure, the same kind of rhythmic phrasing. So here my plan is to have a 4-chord B flat, and then we're going to move to the 1 chord again, and then the 2 chord here, G minor. So in the bass part, so we want to go up to B flat here. And we'll change this all to instrument 0 and make sure we've got effect 5 on everything. We want to keep the same texture as what's come before. All right, let's see what that sounds like. Okay, so there's just some counterpoint here that we need to figure out. And then we'll repeat this again. And then we could probably, actually what we'll need to do is we'll need to take 20 and 21, copy those into 22 and 23. And then we'd need to change the phrase structure again here, and then we can loop back to the beginning. So this isn't going to sound quite right, but just so you get an idea of the form. Yeah, so this obviously needs tweaking, but for the sake of a short demonstration, I'm going to leave you there. But hopefully you can see how with this going to the 4 chord here and changing the phrasing, you can easily develop a new section and loop it back to the A section. And now all of a sudden your composition is 2 times longer. Hope that helps and gives you some ideas as to how to develop your own compositions. If you have any questions or want me to clarify anything, leave a comment below. This might be a new series that I start where I take other people's music and demonstrate some tips and techniques as to how to develop them. So if you'd like to have your own music as part of one of these tutorials, send me a message and I'll see what I can do. Okay, have a good one.